Let's get some divisional round best bets from DraftKings Contributors Pearce Dietrich, Reid Fowler, and Steve Buchanan.
Okay, Steve, start us off, please. What is your favorite spread on the board out of the 4 games in the divisional round this weekend?
Boy, coming onto the show, I said, what are my counterparts going to bring up? So, ideally, the best value on the board is the Packers -6. Because let me tell you something, Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to play in this game. So once that news comes out, you're going to see this spread move. But I'm going to take it a step further. I am going to go with the team that made me more money than any other team in the league. The Cincinnati Bengals +3.5 against the Titans. Last week, I gave you an alternate spread to take. Take the 6.5 with the Rams. That was an easy cash. You know what else is going to be an easy cash this week? -6.5 for the Bengals against the Titans. They're going to wipe the floor with this team in that fraud secondary that they're running out. Oh, Derrick Henry's back. Yippee! Doesn't matter when they're down by 27 points because Derrick Henry doesn't catch. Let me tell you something. The Bengals have been one of the best teams against the spread as road underdogs. 4-1 in that scenario, covering by an average of 11.1 points. Give me the Bengals moving on easily against the Titans.
Love it. Joe Burrow, by the way, 4-0 straight up against the spread in his past 4 starts too, Steven. Reid, what about you, dude?
I don't know why Steve comes on this show and makes it so difficult for himself. He could just easily stick with the regular number in the spread, but he goes alternate. And that worked in our favor last week against Ulrich, but we all know Ulrich's a dope. So, that was an easy call. I know Pierce is on here wishing that the Steelers won, but old man Ben couldn't come to fruition. He couldn't do anything. But like Steve mentioned at the very onset, it's the Packers right now. The Packers right now at 6, it's potentially it could come down to 5.5, which is a dead number. But you talk about injuries, talk about that side with San Francisco and Jimmy Garoppolo not playing in that game. If that moves up, you're getting some extreme value under a touchdown for Aaron Rodgers. They're coming off a bye. They got a ton of rest. All their guys are healthy. And you have a secondary that has Josh Norman on it. Emmanuel Mosley is fine, but Josh Norman is cooked. He is not a good cornerback right now, and I get it. Green Bay is not great against the run, and Eli Mitchell is fantastic, and I liked the 49ers earlier this week, but, hearing about Jimmy G with a bad thumb already and a bad shoulder, and Nick Bosa and Fred Warner being at less than 100%, I think both of them are going to play, but less than 100%, that scares me quite a bit because the 49ers rush and blitz the least, or one of the least teams out of the NFL, or the least, at least in this in the playoffs right now. So that's the one that catches my eye earlier in the week.
All right, Pierce, what's your favorite spread on the board?
Eve and I are in agreement, so that worries me a little bit here. It's the Bengals. The Titans are frauds. 24th, we look at strength of schedule. They've had a really easy schedule and a very fortuitous schedule. They played good teams at the right times. They're just not a good team. They play in the AFC. They play in the AFC South. They lost to the Steelers. The Bengals crushed the Steelers both times they played them. And Steve's right. Who cares about Derrick Henry? It doesn't really matter about Derrick Henry or not. And if Derrick Henry was fine, why are they rushing him back? If this was a good team, why are they rushing Derrick Henry back? But it doesn't matter because the Bengals offense is going to get up early on this team, force the Titans into a passing scheme. And that's how the Titans always lose. We've seen this before. And the Bengals have the offensive firepower to get up early and pretty much just punch them in the face, knock them down, and the Titans never get up off the mat.
Mm-hmm. All right, Reid, how about your favorite total to target?
Yeah, it's probably that Green Bay game. But for parity's sake, I think targeting the Buffalo Bills in Kansas City and going on the over is pretty bullish. This is a high total at 54.5, 55, wherever it lands. It's right on a key number. And so if it is where it's at right now, under 55, I like it even more. If you look at both of these teams, especially from an offensive scheme perspective, Buffalo has really done well. And Brian Daboll, who's probably going to be a head coach somewhere else next year, has schemed perfectly when it comes to the playoffs and doing positive EV plays on early downs, right? Early down and distance. And that's what really gets this number up. And I get the secondary and the defense for Kansas City right now, is playing better, but they're still suspect. And I really like, and Josh Allen, you're probably buying the Bills and Josh Allen right now at his peak because of what he did last week. But if you look at this matchup earlier in the year, 38-20, they put up a ton of points. If you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, 7-4-1, hitting the over when the number is over 50, and Buffalo has been fantastic hitting the overs when the number has been over 50. So even though it's the highest, I have the most faith that both of these offenses will show up.
All right, Pearce, which total are you targeting?
I'll stay in that game, and I'm going to go on the other side. I know that the Bills and the Chiefs are third and fourth when it comes to points per game, but these defenses are much better than Reid is letting on. Buffalo, number one in DVOA. Buffalo, number one in points allowed. Kansas City towards the top with 17.9 points allowed at home. You look at the first 7 games, which Reid points out. Kansas City was terrible. They were allowing 29 points per game, worst in the league. Over the last 10 games, Kansas City is only allowing 16.1 points per game. That's the best in football. They've made a lot of changes on the defensive end since that last matchup against Buffalo, and it's worked, obviously. The defenses, I think, are just as good as the offenses, and they don't even have to be that great. All they have to do is turn touchdowns into field goals, and you're going to stay under this pretty lofty number.
All right, Steve, what do we think?
There are 9 teams in the NFL that had at least hit the over on 50% of their games. 2 of those teams are facing each other this week with the Rams and Buccaneers. I like the over of 47.5 in this game. Look what happened with the Rams last week or the other day against the Cardinals. They decimated the Cardinals, and that's without even really utilizing Cooper Kupp, who only made 5 catches for 61 yards. Cam Akers came back. This freak of nature came back from tearing his Achilles and then ran the ball 17 times for 55 yards. Let me tell you something. This Bucs run defense, that stone wall that they had all season long, yeah, it sprung a leak. All of a sudden, they can't stop the run. That's not good news if you have a healthy Cam Akers back, Sony Michel, who still stinks, but whatever. He's been doing pretty good. I'll give him that, okay? But I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this one. The Rams have to go fast. They have to keep the Bucs off the field. But when the Bucs are on the field, they're scoring. They're going to be able to score against this Rams secondary as well. I think that game's going over.
Guys, we also like to talk about games with high totals on the show. We do it quite a bit, but it's usually more fun, obviously. On the DK Sportsbook, though, there's a divisional round special that asks which game will be the lowest scoring game on divisional weekend. So Cincinnati, Tennessee, and then San Fran, Green Bay, currently tied as the favorite here, plus 200 odds. So which game will see the fewest amount of fireworks, do you think, Pearce?
Jump on the San Fran Green Bay game. We know Green Bay has the firepower to pour the points on to other teams, but we also know that when they get a lead, they'll just lean on the running backs, play safe at home, and work the clock. Their defense is a bend but don't break style, so they'll give up plenty of yards, but they'll eat up a lot of clock time, and they don't surrender that many points. And as Steve mentioned earlier, San Francisco's quarterback jawline might be intact, but it looks like he's got other injuries that are probably going to limit their offensive potential against a good defense. And then also Green Bay, it's not going to be a necessarily easy time against the San Fran defense. So this would be my pick to score the fewest points.
All right, Steve, what do you think? Which one are you going with?
Yep, slim pickings here. Not a lot to choose from. So I'm going to agree with Pearce. Look, that San Francisco team is coming in pretty banged up. What's that defensive line going to look like when they take the field on Sunday, Saturday, whatever, when the game happens? I don't care what day it is. What's that offense going to look like when they take the field? Is it Jimmy Garoppolo? Is it Trey Lance? I don't think it really makes a difference, right, at this point. So for me, the Packers feel like one of the most complete teams that still remain in the playoffs. They got a great secondary. They got a great run defense, great offense, even though it's just Rodgers and Devontae Adams through the air, but that doesn't seem to matter. So I think the 49ers are going to struggle with the injuries that they have. I don't trust Jimmy Garoppolo at all, especially if they're playing from behind. So if I had to take a guess, I think there's going to be a lot of points scored over the weekend overall. But if that's the case, I think this is the game that can go under.
Okay, 49ers Packers 8:15 on Saturday night. Reid, which game will have the least amount of points do you expect?
Well, although I really appreciate Steve's shirt this morning in the Guns N' Roses, he is way off on Green Bay being a really good run defense. They are arguably one of the worst in the NFL, in EPA, in DVOA. But having said that, I agree with both of these guys that this is the game that probably at the first look has the lowest, right, because of all the injuries. I would argue, though, that going back to that Tampa Bay game, Steve, and I actually like the over in that one, but if you look at that offensive line for Tampa Bay, right, Jensen and Wirfs, Jensen's probably going to be in their center, but he came out a few plays, and I don't think Tristan Wirfs is going to play. That scares me a little bit. And if you look at Stafford and both of these offenses too, right, in Tampa Bay and Los Angeles, both of those games last week didn't really show us anything, right? Stafford threw less than 20 attempts. Philadelphia was, talk about frauds. Philadelphia was essentially a fraud to get into the playoffs, and it didn't show up. And Jalen Hurts and Sirianni just weren't ready for the moment. So that does scare me a little bit. And if you look at Stafford outside, right, he doesn't play well when he's not in a dome. And the Rams are 2-4, hitting the over in games on, away games outside. So that might scare me a little bit. But I'm on these guys. Just wanted to add some parity to the show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
Means a lot.
Steve, the expectation around the NFL is that Derrick Henry will make his return from that foot injury he suffered in October when the Titans host the Bengals this weekend. So on the DK Sportsbook, Henry is minus 190 to score a touchdown. What are the chances he gets in the end zone if he suits up?
Yeah, I mean, you're really paying some, premium price here for him to get into the end zone for somebody we haven't seen for months. But look, if they're going to use him in any type of scenario, using him in the the red zone is where they're going to be using him here. So, am I excited to pay minus 190 to put him in there to score a touchdown? Not really. But I think it's a pretty good piece that you can put in if you're creating it like a same game parlay, because like I mentioned, if they're going to use Henry in any type of scenario, using him in the red zone is what makes the most sense. So, you're paying a pretty hefty price for somebody we haven't seen in months, but that is the most likely scenario they're going to use him in. So, do I like the number? No. Can you use it as a piece in your same game parlay? Absolutely. I think that's a great piece to use that in, but I wouldn't be going more towards him scoring a touchdown. If I'm taking anything with him, I'll take a shot with first touchdown score at plus 450. That's the only touchdown they score. Then Joe Burrow scores 37 unanswered points.
Reid, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, I'm with Steve. If you look at the Cincinnati run defense, they've been pretty middle of the pack, right? Look what the Josh Jacobs did last week. He averaged 6.7 yards per attempt. And, I kind of share the same worry as Steve does with how are they going to use him. And if they do, it's going to be in the red zone. Why not go with Ryan Tannehill anytime scorer at plus 290? Can't you see him running on a naked bootleg? When 22 comes in at the 5-yard line, 2-yard line, and everyone's expecting him to get the ball, everyone's going to be on him, and no one's going to be on Tannehill, who earlier in his career when he's with Miami or even with Tennessee, he was a guy who ran the ball quite a bit. So I don't like it because it's the you have to pay a huge amount of juice on this. But how can you not in terms of Henry when he's on the end zone? But give me some Ryan Tannehill.
Pierce, what do we think?
I'm with Reid. The Tannehill plus 290 seems to be the better bet. If Henry plays, he'll get in the end zone. I watched a 5-second Twitter clip of him in practice. He looks good to go. My expert analysis is he'll be fine. But I just don't understand. Maybe other people watch that clip. I bet it's going to get down to minus 200 or whatever. So if you're going to make that bet, you probably ought to make it now. But I would much rather take the plus 290 on Tannehill.
Hey, Reid, before you guys take off, give us one bold prediction for the divisional round weekend.
Allen Lazard, 2 touchdowns, over 100 yards rushing. No, just the 2 touchdowns. Over 100 is a little crazy. Like I mentioned Cedric Wilson last week for my Make It Rain pick, and he did pretty well, right? He didn't get in the end zone, but Allen Lazard right now on rest, this guy always seems to be the one that gets those long 40-yard bombs. So give me 2 touchdowns for Allen Lazard. All
right, Pierce.
I told you that Steve and I were in agreement. It's Bengals minus 6.5 at plus 320. And I let this wait to make this bet because I think the Derrick Henry hype train is going to push the odds more in the favor of Tennessee. So if you wait, you might get even more plus money on this bet. The Bengals are going to go out, score early and often, force Tennessee to be one-dimensional, and it's pretty much game over at that point.
All right, Steve, get weird for me.
I mean, I how can I not go with what I said originally? I'm taking a 3.5-point underdog and making them 6.5-point favorites. That's your bold take. That's the one that's going to hit. You're going to thank me on Monday, and all will be right in the world. Joe Burrow, he's a stud.